Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 232, recorded live in Big Dog Studios. This show is brought to you by... You know what I hate? I hate going and clicking on the search engine and entering terms in and finding all these big companies that own all the search terms. Fact is, you can get it there. You can get your company there in a different way. Mudpod Design can help you out. See them for SEO services at mudpoddesign.com.
Welcome, Phyllis. I'm so glad to have you here.
Right? Thank you for having me.
It's been a really strange time, hasn't it, over the last few months?
It has been an unusual time in history.
Yes.
Yes.
And it is, although it's very foreign to many of us here now today, but it is not something that was foreign to Southern culture, is it?
Not at all. As far as having to go back to the basics, getting back to your roots, becoming more independent in your ability to make your home remedies and healthcare choices. Nope. This is the way it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's something the Northern culture hasn't had to the same extent. I mean, there's been plenty of times where times were tough. You know, Minnesota, deep winter, you're on your own for months on end, sure, but it's not the same as what we're going through now.
Right. Not at all. And like everybody else, I'll be glad when we've settled into our new norm, because I think it's going to be totally new, and almost everything is going to be done in a different way now. It's really going to change society and change healthcare and change how we do herbalism and how we teach herbalism, and it's going to change how doctors do medicine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think I think it's a long time coming. I think it's an important change that we're making. I wish that it didn't have to be thrust upon us in this fashion, shall we say, but here we are, and you know, it will hopefully bring better.
Hopefully.
So you have a leg up on many of us in that you grew up right there in the woods, right?
I did. My dad's family were wild crafters and herbalists. So that was, I just grew up doing this.
I read your book, Southern Folk Medicine, which is, everybody should read it. It's a really good book. And
Thank you.
One of the stories I loved in there was the ginseng hunting. And is it sang? The sang?
Sang.
Okay. Because I'm like, I know I'm not pronouncing that right. Sang.
Saying, don't even try, honey.
Yeah, I know. I'm not going to get it. My parents going to be looking at me later laughing because I'm going to be trying to say that over and over until I get it. And I probably still won't. So what is it like to be doing that?
Oh, wow. Okay. So it is, for me at that time period in my life, it was family time to start with, because it's not something you do alone. It's like the whole group of us met, and part of the family went off to the woods, and the other part of the family stayed home and cooked, and got ready for the sang hunters to come back home. So it was like this really family unity time, and I was the oldest of my siblings, so I got to go out.
Nice.
With parents and grandparents, and be part of all this at a very early age. I was out running around the woods with them when I was about, 5, 6, 7. Not seriously trying to help until I was about 10, and didn't feel halfway proficient until I was about 16, 17, 18, I guess.
And there's snakes.
If it doesn't have the berry on it, which is a real, signature, that red berry, then it's not super noticeable on the forest floor.
Yeah.
It kind of blends in with everything else. So number one, I loved going just because it was me, my dad, my granddad, great aunts, great uncles. These were all my grandfathers, sisters, or brothers, or brother-in-laws. So it was like extended family time, and I could run between one and the other going down the mountain, and everybody was kind of spaced out, but within general visual or shouting distance, looking for patches, wild patches. And then there were some patches that were, trying to think of the right word. Farmed is the wrong word because they weren't really touched, but wild patches that were nurtured. That's the good word. Nurtured, so that year after year we could come back to them and gather a few and replant the seeds in the ground where we dug, and so that the patches continued. So that was number one. It was just like a great family time in the woods. And then we didn't take water with us because we weren't afraid to drink out of the creeks and springs. And I would not do that now, let me tell you, because there just wasn't any pollution and not a lot of industry. There was almost no industry and no big cattle farms. Farm industry that would pollute the water. So, and we might take a biscuit and jelly or a sausage biscuit that mother had made or grandmother made, and that was your snack and your lunch until you got back home. And we tried to go early in the morning, and we're usually done late lunch time because it just got too hot and miserable in the woods, and everybody was ready to go home. And then we would get back home and we'd have this big giant family meal. There might be 25, 30 people eating after the ginseng hunt. And then there would be storytelling about, I ran across this in the woods, and I ran up on this snake in the woods, and I found an old chimney in the woods. So, so it'd be storytelling, and then everybody would kind of filter home before supper time. So it was just a super neat family time. It was also a very serious time because this was also, money. Yeah. This was gathering the ginseng was how are you going to pay the electric bill in the winter, and it was the cash crop. Right. And, it was serious, and it was serious that you didn't want to gather at all. You wanted to save some for next year, so you keep coming back. And it was serious that you needed to find new patches and needed to extend your territory just so you'd be able to do that. So you'd have that kind of cash money coming in for the winter time with, so it was also serious work at the same time. It was also, I have to say, independent work. You were in the woods and you weren't beholden to anybody to pay your wages. This was kind of a big deal too. I'm not even sure I can explain that well. It's like it was you and the land and what you dug and your abilities and your skills and availability and all those things all rolled into one, but it was you. It was you in the plants. It was you in the woods.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's your relationship with the plants that's feeding and sustaining you. That's
right. And it was like way more independent than working in a factory or working in a restaurant, where your livelihood was dependent upon somebody else's skills and their ability to keep the business going and their ability to sell the product. Right. It was you. So there was this feeling of, independence. We're ginseng hunters, Yeah. We were independent.
Well, and it also, the plants, you can count on them, but economy, not always. Restaurants.
Not always.
Restaurants go out of business. Factories lay people off. Things industry goes up and down and up and down, sometimes unpredictably.
It does, but there was this other aspect to it that about the independence of, kind of the gruff Appalachian economy. So you don't want to be beholden to anybody.
Right.
So there was this kind of feeling of, pride, maybe not. It's not even pride. I don't. It just this.
Yeah, something that's
crazy,
intangible.
Yeah, it is almost intangible, but it has to do with why it would have been better to have made the liquor and be a bootlegger than it was to go to work in the factory. You were working for yourself. You were independent. It was you.
Yeah.
And you weren't beholden to anybody. You weren't taking charity from anybody. It was you and your relationship to your own work. Yeah. Whatever that might be in the mountains. So it was that way with kind of ginseng hunting. It was your independence. And if you worked hard enough and gathered enough ginseng, you could have enough to live on through the winter, and you could take it easy, right? Right? It's not like you had a lot of money. Everybody was still canning and freezing food and still rabbit hunting and squirrel hunting and stuff like that. But you could pay those bills that required money. You could buy flour and coffee and cornmeal and sugar and the things that you couldn't grow.
Yeah.
Right. So you had money for that, and then spring rolled around and you could do something else,
Yeah. It sounds, honestly, to some extent, it sounds kind of heavenly. I mean,
It was a lot of hard-ass work, let me tell you.
Right, romantically it sounds heavenly, but that would be
romantically it sounds heavy. Practically, you're working your butt off all the time.
Right. So, with all that work, what drew you into studying plants? I mean, that's a lot of work.
Well, and I wasn't immediately in my youth, because it was like something my dad did. Well, he worked construction sites. He was just a construction worker too. He still had to have something else to go with it. And herbalists didn't get paid in those days in this area. It was your calling. You did it and you didn't get paid. If they had something they might give you, in trade, a lot of squash came my way in the early days. But, you didn't get paid. So everybody, unless you had doctor in front of your name. So here's kind of the difference between what my family did and what an herb doctor was, because we had herb doctors in the area too. And they had doctor in front of their name. They weren't physicians, by any means, but they were more of the eclectic. I think they were kind of the remains of the eclectic physicians that ended up hanging around in the South forever and ever. Because really eclectic medicine started in the South, and then kind of spread to other places. The first medical school in Alabama was an eclectic medical school in eclectic Alabama. That's the name of the town. So we had herb doctors who were, I maybe had gone to a naturopathic kind of college somewhere, but studied eclectic medicine too. And, one of my first herb books was an eclectic medical book, because people just had them in their houses. Eclecticism was very, very influential in Southern folk medicine, and Southern folk medicine helped start eclecticism, eclectic medicine. So there was it filtered over into folk medicine. So you could be an herb doctor, and there was one in town, in addition to conventional medical doctors who also might prescribe herbs and certainly prescribe dietary measures, but also use medicines in could get in the hospital, right? Had privileges in the hospital. You know, there was an herb doctor, and then there was like my grandmother, the midwife, folk herbalist. So those sort of different statuses, I guess you would say, really disappeared in the 70s. Was the last I had, maybe late 70s, the last I heard of a herb doctor around anywhere. Just because the conventional medicine gained such a hold on healthcare in this country. Big shift.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was actually such a good thing, but not having.
Well, I am definitely have an integrative bent because I can see what it would be like without antibiotics, and I did see what it was like without antibiotics. And we do need some medicines, and sometimes we need a skillful surgeon to do things.
Yeah.
So I do believe there's a place where we can meet, and like COVID-19, this virus is becoming a place where this is happening. I have heard physicians say, actually I heard a nurse at the next big town over, which has got a huge hospital, say this is the first time in her career they were using drugs and IV nutrients at the same time. Never before.
Yeah.
So, so this is where they're finding that vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin D status is just really important. And so, it's becoming standard as we move into conventional treatment of COVID-19. The people getting IV vitamin C, that's never happened.
Right.
That's not happened. And I don't know how many, 50 years or something. I don't know. So, and just the fact that all this information is hitting the airwaves about the use of herbs during COVID and the helpfulness, it's working into conventional medicine.
Yeah.
At least the awareness. So this integration, I'm hoping will continue.
I'm hoping.
And just get better.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we start seeing, I don't know, personally, I really hope that we see herbalists and like herb doctors and people who are quite skilled starting to get more standing, I guess you could say, or more respect.
Right. More, yeah, totally. I totally agree. I hope that happens. Keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, right.
Right. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, you can only just wait and see, really. I mean,
that's all you can do.
It's like watching the plants grow. You just wait and see what will happen now. Soil's been changed. Let's see if this makes a difference.
Yeah. If it gets enough rain and sun, it might.
It might take root. That would be a nice thing.
You would be.
So you continued on. Did you end up going to school for herbs then, or?
No. No, I'm sorry. People ask me that all the time. I go, no. I continued with, hanging out with my dad after my grandmother died. And my grandmother's real heyday was actually before I was even born, when she was younger.
Yeah.
By the time I was coming along, she was on the retirement end of everything, and midwifery had been made illegal in the state of Alabama. So, she was kind of like not practicing anymore. And so I was kind of on the tail end of opportunities to study with her and my grandfather. So, my dad, after she died, my dad kind of picked up. And he was good in the woods and he knew plants. And as I write in my book, my dad could do 1,000 things with ginseng. You got a cold? Oh, take this much ginseng. You got menstrual cramps? Take this much ginseng. You got this? Take this much. Because he really, really knew the plant.
Yeah.
He was the supreme simpler, and so was my grandmother. They could take one plant, and because plants are so phytochemically variable and complex, it's really true that one plant can do a lot of things. So in my classes, I teach my students, it's better to know everything 10 plants can do than know one thing 100 plants can do.
Yeah.
So much better.
That seems very wise, especially if you're working with 10 plants that you can find in the area that you live and practice in.
Live in. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the art of sampling, and they were supreme in that, and that's what I was taught. So I after that, and I got a little older, and I was had various avenues of study. Ex-father-in-law or deceased father-in-law. He was an ex before he was deceased, but anyway, influential in my life was a chiropractor, and he was absolutely friggin' amazing. Can I say friggin'? Friggin'
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, yeah, you can do that.
Right? He could just look at somebody's spine and tell them what was wrong with them.
Wow.
He would just have people come in and take off their shirt or their blouse and in privacy and face the wall, and he would just look at their spine. He really taught me how important nutrition was, because he really believed you had to nourish the nerves and nourish the body for it to work properly. And he plied me with all sorts of nutrition textbooks and conversations around nutrition. And he was the one that taught me, if you don't have good nutrition, if you don't have this foundation of nutritional wellness in your body, the herbs are not going to do their job. You have to give them something to work with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So herbs are not nutritionally dense. They're phytochemically dense. Food that we grow in our garden is nutritionally dense, but not necessarily phytochemically dense. We grow them for two different reasons. And wild plants are the best of all, because they've been growing, having to deal with with attacks by fungus, attacks by viruses, attacks by bacteria, not enough water, too much water, not enough sun, too much sun. And they produce these amazing, wonderful healing phytochemicals as their response, as their stress response.
Yeah.
So when we coddle an herb, we take away its good medicine.
Yeah.
But garden vegetables, we have had a relationship with for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they have to be coddled.
Yeah. They need us as much as we need them.
Yeah. They won't survive on their own without us. So that's the exchange. We coddle them, they get to reproduce, and we get all the good nutrition from them.
Oh man, that's such a pickup. You got to try this tiger tea from Sacred Blossom Farms. In fact, if you go to sacredblossomfarms.com right now and enter in real herb, all caps, 15, you can save 15% on your next order. Tell them that Practical Herbalist sent you.
And so, it was a kind of a different view that he taught me. And then I studied with Tommy Bass. And Tommy was probably one of the most well-known herbalists in the whole United States at the time. And him and Dr. Christopher probably, depending on what part of the country you were in. But Tommy never studied with anybody. I mean, Tommy had no herb books in his house. Everything he learned was from another herbalist, and so that's how I learned.
Right.
So Tommy was, he had been working in the woods and studying with some other herbalist or the other. He started when he was 5. And by the time he was in his early teens, he was seeing people on his own. And that's kind of what he did his whole life. I mean, he worked the cotton fields. Remember, you can't be an herbalist here at this time period and make any money.
Right.
Right? You have to have your other jobs.
Yeah.
And so, like I had to work in the cotton fields. My maternal grandfather had cotton and was a sharecropper, so we had to be in the cotton fields. And Tommy he had to be in the cotton fields, and he grew almost all of his own food. And for a while, he was a fur trapper. And then he logged. He was a really good small appliance repair person. When you could still repair small appliances like toasters and ovens, people still repaired them in those days. Lawnmowers and bicycles. He was really good with a bicycle. So, he made some of his cash money doing these other kind of things. But at the heart of everything he did was herbalism and gathering the herbs both for himself, and his clients, and to sell to larger herb companies. And he was so well known with larger herb companies that they would just like call him or mail him a letter and say, can you get us this many pounds of skull cow, or can you get us this many pounds of American ginseng, or can you get us this many pounds of black cohosh, whatever it was I needed. He was a reliable and dependable source and a person who ethically harvested. It was like my grandparents. He knew you can't take it all, and you've got to nurture it or it won't be there.
Right.
But Tommy he had only ever studied with other people, and his parents, he was second generation English, and Bass being an old English name. And so his parents, when they had immigrated to the United States, they brought some herbal recipes with them, because his mom's family had been folk herbalist in England. And so he had that foundation within his family that his mom had a certain amount of herbal knowledge, but these are different plants. And so his parents came here, he was born here, and all his siblings were born in the States. And we had some plants here that the parents recognized from England, but there were so many others they didn't.
Right.
So his parents also had to learn the plants in the woods. And so when Tommy was 5, he started working for Aunt Molly Kirby, who was an African-American herbalist and midwife at the foot of the mountain, and Tommy lived at the top of the mountain. And so she just gotten so old and tired. She said she couldn't walk up and down the mountains anymore to get the herbs, and nobody in her family wanted to learn. So she started paying Tommy to do it, to get her herbs, and teaching him at the same time. So he worked for her and learned for her, as long as he could until she died. Yeah. And so then Tommy took over, basically he got her practice. And his reputation just extended. So he became so well known that the Wall Street Journal, he was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal 2 or 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And that's pretty famous for an herbalist. And,
oh, yeah.
That information is still there, and there are quite a number of documentaries about him. And University of North Carolina did a couple of amazing books on him and his herbal use in his life. And so he's quite a well-documented herbalist, probably one of the more well-documented ones in this country, especially during his time period.
Oh, yeah.
And he's one of the reasons that I do believe that in Alabama, Southern folk medicine has remained active.
Yeah, I'm amazed that it has, considering how modern medicine really did a great job of stomping out a lot. And then it's been coming back, but there's a long period of time where it was conventional medicine or nothing. you know.
Well, in other parts of the country, and this is what I've said to several times at herbal conferences about the herbal renaissance. I was like, first time I heard that, oh, we have an herbal renaissance. And I was like, what is that? And I was asking that in all honesty. And I said, well, you know, these people are bringing back the use of herbs to the country. And I was like, in the South, in 13 states in the South, it never went away.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just that we just didn't care to share it.
Yeah.
Or tell anybody about it. It was held within families. It was, you know, nobody could afford to go to the doctor. So you had your home remedies. And so these were thought of more as home remedies rather than this title of herbalism.
Yeah.
Right? Now, almost everybody, when I was growing up, knew that if you had acid indigestion, you could go get some yellow root and chew on it and it would take care of it if you had an ulcer. Or if you had just a sour stomach, you could chew on the leaf of a sourwood tree. Or, so it was considered home remedies. And so to have this kind of title of herbalism, it was like, it was like a different context for me.
Yeah.
It
really, how your culture, I mean, how the traditions around you frame it, it really gives you a different connection.
Right. So it had never gone away here.
Yeah.
Home remedies and roots had not ever stopped. Definitely it slowed down, but it hadn't stopped. Not by a long ways. And still hasn't.
Is it picking up steam more there now?
It never didn't have steam. I mean, I've been doing this, but I'm not even going to say how many thousands of years I've been doing this. Never had a problem. No. Like I say, I think that what happened is it skipped a generation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes things skip generations, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, like my grandmother, my dad, me, and I think there was this generation born right after me, that was, herbs were considered old fashioned, not ineffective, and people would still do them. People would still say, do you have any catnip? Mm-hmm. My baby's got colic, people would still do them, but they were considered a little old-fashioned. And also there's another thing, like in parts of the South, is there are religious groups who still don't believe in conventional medicine. Mm-hmm. And they only want, and that's a lot more people than you would think it would be. Oh, yeah. Right? They're going to do an herb and be almost dead before they get to the doctor. Right. Because they're going to be praying too.
Yeah.
And so, it's a spiritual part of their spiritual practice, because herbs is God's medicine.
Yeah.
And pharmaceutical is man's medicine.
Right.
Big distinction.
Yeah.
So back to the original question, I had these studies. I never conventionally studied herbalism or went to anybody's herb school, because I had the folk tradition that I was following. And actually, it wasn't until, don't laugh, wasn't until I was actually in, I'm going to say around 40, that I realized there was an herbalist in another part of the country, and there was this herbal renaissance people were talking about. Because I was just down here seeing people. I mean, like one year when I was working with Tommy, saw 3,000 people. How many herbalists see that many people in a year?
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
That's like 10 a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, easy. And when I opened my practice, I put up my shingle in Huntsville, which is a pretty big city. I always saw 6 to 8 people a day, sometimes 10.
Wow.
5.5 days a week.
Wow.
So you can see it, and it never really died here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I got to tell you that I live in a town that's got a lot of herbs and herbal awareness, and that's, I mean, we're the like headquarters for Mountain Rose Herbs, for goodness sake. You know, we've got a lot of, and putting out your shingle is not going to draw you that many. I mean, even if you're talking and giving walks and all of that, it's hard to make a living. Even if you're, you know, no matter what you're charging for, it's just hard to get people in the door here. Unless you're giving it away for free, but even then it can be really challenging because there's a lot of northern mentality here. So
I can hear that. I mean, yeah. So here, no, it's like I say, it never really went away. There is an acceptance here that I have not found in the rest of the country, because I think one difference is that I've noticed when I traveled around, and I've traveled around a lot of states. I mean, I've traveled all over this country teaching and presenting at conferences and speaking at herb schools. And generally, when that happens, you know, you're like talking to the choir, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that comes is somebody that's already been to study with this person, that person, gone to this school, that school, right?
Yeah.
Right. But here it's like, you know, chicken farmers and truck drivers and.
Nice.
Right.
It's what we call the mainstreamers here. You know?
It's just the people.
Yeah.
I've given talks in churches on herbs.
Wow.
Right. It's a different acceptance.
Yeah, that's I think something we dream of bringing back, and that's why we talk about things like herbal renaissance, because we want to bring that back to our culture in the northern or in the other states. We want to do what you're doing.
Well, you know what? You have to get out of the herbal community to do that.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I don't know, it might piss somebody off for me to say this, but as long as you're only working within the choir and teaching to the choir, you're not going to get into mainstream.
Yeah.
So it's having the willingness to step outside your community. And maybe there's this feeling of, I won't be safe if I step outside my community. You know, at least if I'm got my doors open to other herbalists, there's a safety there.
Yeah.
And when you step outside and start talking to truck drivers and chicken farmers and first grade school teachers,
yeah,
you know, maybe
I've been seeing it in folks who aren't part of the herbal community. I've been seeing it opening up. There's a long period when I was first beginning to study, like a decade ago or two decades ago, not that long ago. I feel old now, but when I was first beginning to study, there was a lot of hostility and resentment and anger if you started to talk about plants or diet as being a way to be healthier. That was a completely unacceptable conversation. And, you know, there were people that would get, you know, their houses egged and things like that. I didn't have that happen personally, but I heard, you know, some other friends at the time said that they had problems with that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I remember that time period. You know, it was pre-DSHEA time period, and DSHEA regulations really help clarify and change some of that. But I tell you, people still get upset if you talk about their diet and nutrition. Yeah. There's nothing more personal. They'll talk to you about their sex life before they'll tell you about their diet.
Yeah, or at least tell you about their diet with any honesty.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They'll tell you everything else. But there's this constant, and I don't even know what this attitude is, but it's like, I don't care if you judge me about anything else in my life, but you're not going to judge me about what I eat.
Right.
Because people had this feeling if they tell you, you're judging them.
Right.
Right? So there's nothing more personal than talking about somebody's diet to them.
Yes.
And you always have to be very non-judgmental in session when I'm asking, what did you eat last night? Yeah. And that's where I'm back to my chiropractic father-in-law. This is where the education really needs to come in. Yeah. They'll accept herbs before they'll accept a change in their diet.
Yeah. And the dietary change is every bit as important, if not more so, than the herbs.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, if you're continuing to eat an offending substance like gluten, mm-hmm. It's a continual insult. How well are herbs going to work to reduce that inflammation and change the leaky gut? If you don't change your diet, it's not going to change.
Right.
So, we have to find a way to have a more openness and non-judgmental approach to diet. And that's still going on. That, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something I continually think about and work, try to figure out how to work on.
Yeah, Patrick and I live in a town where if you go to like a potluck, say there's like going to be 10 various friends and family, you have to like write out everything that's in the food that you've brought, all the ingredients, whether they're organic, and sometimes how it was processed, and if it was processed in a kitchen that also has nuts or wheat or any of the other things, because everybody here has a different diet. And everybody here believes their diet is the best diet on earth, and everyone else should adopt their diet.
Yeah, and I think that's what we come to.
Yeah.
It's this militant, and it really is kind of a militant philosophy about food, whatever your diet is.
Yeah, it's like diet righteousness.
It is. It is. And that's a huge roadblock or huge blockade to good health.
It is.
Somewhere in all that is moderation and a better approach to healthiness. There's that. So anyway, back to the original question again. is that no, I never did. But I ended up doing a lot of other things, because remember, I can't make a living at being an herbalist. Not for a long time. Let's see so I had all these other careers that kind of fed into herbalism later, when I was going like, okay, I'm just going to put out a shingle now. I think, here's a big town, I'll go over there, people have money, they might pay me, kind of thought. Because in my small town, they're still not. Right. And I lost clients when I said I'm moving to Huntsville and I want to start charging, but because they were like, your grandmother never charge. But anyway, I was athletic when I was younger and loved movement, and taught gymnastics and taught little 5-year-olds ballet, and I taught jazz and jazz dance to little kids, but I was a personal trainer and got my certificates in that to understanding how the body moved, which is like just amazing. I did all, for years I worked in gyms and part-time, did herbalism on the side. So just kind of a huge educational process in that, along with that. I've always believed in chiropractics, and so, I've always worked with that. I'm not a chiropractor, but I've always worked with chiropractors too. So I worked in mental health, I was working on a degree in psychology initially, and worked in mental health. I did, I did group sessions. I did intakes when people first walked in the door and said, yeah, you need to do this, you need to do that. I was in charge of the indigent drug program. And I was a physician's assistant. So here's this whole other level of training.
Yeah.
And back when I was a physician's assistant, you didn't have to have a degree. And it's only been in the last few years that you do, because the physician is responsible for you.
Right.
Right. And so I was a physician's assistant, and there were two physicians that I worked between, and this was in mental health. And it was just like an amazing experience. But then one day I was like, you know, I'm in charge of the tongue-tied, drugs for the really poor people who have no money program. And I'm the pharmacist assistant, along with being a physician's, and I was like, these aren't working. I'm seeing all the really horrible side effects.
Right.
I'm seeing the tardive dyskinesia. All right, so tardive dyskinesia is where like the muscles kind of freeze and people even have trouble walking and they have trouble speaking and there's no expression on their face. And how can therapy even help someone like this? You can't even get through. So anyway, I had the good fortune of working with this amazing team of therapists, and who had studied with some of the leaders in the field at their time, and I don't even know how they all ended up in Alabama in the same mental health center at the same time, but it was like people would like pay to be part of that group and some of the work that was being done and who they had studied with. So that was just in addition to being, working with the physicians, being part of this amazing group of people who were concerned about diet and nutrition, who understood that if you're missing key nutrients, your mind is not going to work well.
Right.
If your blood sugar is not functioning at normal levels, your mood is not going to be, your mind's not going to work well. And so here I got to bring my nutritional work studies in, and keep in mind my nutritional studies were all at the knee of somebody else. These were not like going to school and learning nutrition.
I think actually the way you did it is probably the more effective, let's say, way.
Yeah. You get the practical aspects.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is what works and this is why we're doing it and this is how the body works and this is why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think I had that good fortune all the way through that almost every job or group of people or a person I got to work with or study with, it's like, this is what works and this is why we're doing it. Skip the theory, honey.
Yeah.
You get lost in theory, but how do you make it practical? How do you make it useful? Because bottom line, if it's not useful, if it doesn't help the person, what good is it?
Right.
Theory. Right.
Right.
So anyway, I had all these other jobs, and I taught aerobics for 20-something years.
Oh, wow.
I taught yoga for 10 years. I just did all these other things to help make a living. I would have 3 or 4 part-time jobs going all at the same time, while, so I could keep the herb stuff going. But then, then at a certain point, I got a job at Clayton College of Natural Health, which was a true leader. I know it's often listed and on the internet as a diploma mill. And it's unfortunate, but I will totally defend it because it was some of the best natural health information and a true leader of online education ever. Right. And I was director of herbal studies there for 10 years. And while I was at Clayton College, I invented the 3-tier program of family herbalist, community herbalist, and that everybody's doing now.
Yeah.
Nobody, right? Nobody had that before. That was not, you were a master herbalist. That's all anybody had. That was it.
Yeah.
Right?
I like your program much better.
Yeah. So, I initiated that at Clayton College, and, you could be a clinical herbalist. It was not a fluffy program.
Nice.
Our herbal program was not fluffy. It was tough, and people had to record their sessions and send in to me, and they got reviewed in the 3rd year. I mean, it was a serious program.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't even know an online program today with the herbalists who are doing online that was as serious and as tuned in to training out practitioners as Clayton College was. But it just got this bad rep.
Wow.
Because it offered, it offered the degrees that were not state recognized.
Yeah.
But I will say the information was amazing, the community was amazing, and I was so happy to have been there. And so while I was there, they said, okay, we know you're an herbalist, and this was in Birmingham, so still statewide. This is still how accepted herbalism is in the South. And they said, we'd really like you to go get your your master's. So I had a bachelor's in psychology, a double in psychology and marketing and business, I should say. Nice. And so I, at that point, started to and finished the program at the University of Alabama in health studies. So I have a master's in health studies.
So you did eventually learn up.
Well, I did get those initials after my name, but
they were probably, they're really the least of the credentials.
Exactly.
I mean, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, without those initials, I worked in a medical clinic in Birmingham for 2 years, 3 doctors. I was the herbalist nutritionist, integrative clinic. Not having those initials never impeded me from interacting and progressing my practice of herbalism or the practice of herbalism in a more culture-wide avenue, right?
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to have them, those initials. It hasn't hurt, but like I say, I didn't have them when I was working in the medical clinic.
Right.
I had my bachelor's, but it was like not even in the field I was practicing in. And I chose health studies because it kind of gave me an umbrella.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be anything, but it wasn't necessary. I'd already been a physician's assistant, right? I mean,
yeah.
Right. And so it's just different. It's just kind of a different culture. I even had one physician say to me once, he was a neurologist, big giant practice, who said, I would take you as a physician's assistant. And I'm like, yeah, but can you still do that? Because he goes, yeah, because if I will sign off for you, I would take you in a heartbeat, even though I don't have now, they consider you have to have a master's to be a physician's assistant.
Right.
Right. But if the doctor goes, this is what this person has always done, and the physician said, will you take my physician assistant? You still get grandfathered because you were already doing it. You could still get grandfathered in.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the way it was working then.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of like a roundabout way of my journey into kind of credentialing. Other things I've done is, let me see, after Hurricane Katrina, I was herbal director at Common Ground Medical Clinic for a couple of years, and that was like an amazing experience. And there were 4 herbalists working with me, and they were just awesome. They were there every day. I wasn't there every day, and it was just this horrendous. I could do a whole show on what it was like after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, when there was no food, when there was no aid getting in, and there was no water. And the first time I went there, I drove down there. I had to cross Lake Pontchartrain, which is huge. I mean, it's like this long lake that you almost feel like you're going across the ocean on a floating bridge, because the bridge had been taken out.
Oh, God.
And the military had just come in and laid down this floating thing like really quick to get supplies into New Orleans by trucks. And the whole time I'm going over this bridge, I'm going, please God, please God, please let me get on to the other side. Oh, okay. Because it was like moving with the waves and bouncing up and down. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my. It was like one of this, like, die because I don't know how to swim. But you do what you do. You just keep on going. And the Rachel and Jen and Wendy and whoops, I'm forgetting one. I'll think of her in a minute. I can see her. Amy. Were there day in and day out, and really saw the horror of it up close every single day. And me as director, I was there regularly, but not every single day. And it was just amazing what herbalism could do, and talk about a really true integrated clinic. Mm-hmm. That was one immediately after New Orleans, where there was a MD as a clinical director, there was a nurse practitioner, there was a social worker, there was a massage therapist, there was an acupuncturist, there was a chiropractor, there was a licensed professional counselor, and there were herbalists.
Wow. That is actually really impressive.
And it was like just amazing. It was like hard. It was really hard. There was a lot of I had to learn a lot about social justice in a real heartbeat, because there was so much social injustice going on there.
Yeah.
In that time period. And definitely hypocrisy and bigotry and violence. You didn't even want to go out unless there were like 5 or 6 of you. You didn't even like walk out at night because of violence. The murder rate was so high, and the rape rate was so high, and it was a different world.
Yeah.
But everybody hung in there, to help people. So many people were living in their cars, regardless of race, because your house is gone, and your house insurance is not going to pay. Or if your house is still standing, nobody wants to buy it, and you can't make the payments because there are no jobs.
Right.
Yeah. And what jobs they are, guess what? They're going to bring people in from out of state to do them instead of giving them local people.
Right.
It was really tough. It was really tough. Medically, socially, economically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intense.
It was tough.
Yeah.
Intense. It was an intense time to be an herbalist in a city.
Yeah.
It really was. So, a lot of my, so that's kind of like most of what I've kind of done. kind of in a nutshell.
In a very large nutshell. You have done a lot.
It's a very eclectic.
That's like 3 lifetimes right there.
Okay.
Oh. So you've got this book, Southern Folk Medicine. People should read it.
Thank you.
Can they get it from your website?
No.
Is Amazon?
They should just go to Amazon.
Is that the best way for you?
That's the best at this moment. I cannot beat Amazon's price. So it's like one of these things that happens to authors, right? Yes. Even buying my own book from the publisher at the discount I can, by the time I ship it to somebody, they're paying a lot more than they can get it on Amazon.
Okay. So we'll make sure that we include links for that. Where can people get a hold of you?
My website, PhyllisDLight.com. And for everybody who's just hearing Phyllis D Light, it's like D is my middle initial.
Yes, I thought that was absolutely delightful. It's so horrible.
No pun intended. Yeah, it was.
Why would you end the show with a bad pun?
I have to say, I've been fascinated with your name. A lot of herbalists seem to have names that I wonder if they were really given to them or if they picked them up. You know, like,
well, this is my family name. My daddy was Stancelite. My mother was wait for it. She was a Bright before she married my daddy, who was a Light. So her name was Esther Pauline Brightlight.
Oh, wow.
And that is no joke. That is true. So, in the heyday of our family reunions here in town, there'd be like 200 people.
Oh, wow.
All Lights coming to the family reunion from the town. People don't like to go to family reunions much anymore, so I think there was only like 75 last year, somewhere in there. But yes, Light is my true original birth name.
That is cool.
Right. My grandmother was Rosie Light. My granddaddy was Herman Light.
I love it. I love it.
And so D is my middle initial, just to kind of...
To be clear.
To be clear.
And you have Facebook also, right?
I have Facebook, and I am learning Instagram. So stay tuned.
All right.
I will be on Instagram. And... but my website is a good place.
Okay. We will make sure we get those links in the show notes. Thank you so very much, Phyllis, for being with us today.
Yep. And as always, put an herb on it. The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.